Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. How are you doing? Today's guest is Brett Rapkin. Yes, he is writer, producer, and director. Let me rephrase that. He's Emmy Award winning writer, producer, and director. And his new documentary on HBO, The Weight of Gold. I love this documentary. It's 60 minutes. It's on HBO. It's just been released this year, narrated by Michael Phelps. And it basically documents and talks about the mental health of our Olympic athletes. This is such a powerful episode and a great documentary to watch. It resonates with me, not because I went to the Olympics. I mean, I like to say like I'm getting a gold medal at life right now. Anybody, anything? Okay. Um, but it resonates with me because, I played high school, college football, and that career was cut short. I talk about it a little bit in in this episode. And so that transition from going from being an athlete to not being an athlete is rough, is jarring. And a lot of us right now, especially during this time, are going through transitions where we've had a career for so long or a job or a certain way of life, and now that's all been uprooted, and now we're living with a bit more uncertain. We're feeling the uncertainty. There's always been uncertainty, but some of us are now feeling it and are more aware of it than we want to be. And Olympic athletes are going through the same thing. They train for something for 4 years, and then they get that post Olympic depression as they call it. So we talk about that and how to cope, how to get through it. And one of the things, we talked about a little bit in the episode, but I want to reiterate for those of you who are going through that transition and are struggling. One of the most important things you can do is get yourself into a routine. And we talk about this in the episode, but create a routine for yourself, whether it's a morning routine, a night routine. You don't have to figure it all out at once. Just slowly start implementing things in your routine, whether it's a workout, just book yourself for something. If you're like, I don't want to go to the gym, I hate the gym or whatever, just put it on the calendar. See what happens. You don't have to go, but even just putting something on your calendar, that is a step in the right direction. And then trying to stick to the routine as much as possible and asking for help. There's nothing wrong, with asking for help. Even though I mean, listen, I struggle with asking for help all the time. Trust me. But it's something that we need to do. And then also slowly creating a team, whether you have to pay for that team or not. I have an acupuncturist, I have a couples therapist, I have an individual therapist, a doctor, and yes, all those things take money. But I didn't have these things all the time. These are things that I slowly have built myself up to. I've always had a vision of a team and being aware that I need a team of people around me to keep Leo firing on all cylinders. I mean, let's be honest, I'm rarely firing on all cylinders, but just to keep me firing on some of the cylinders, Excuse me. But I just, for those of you out there struggling right now, start with a routine or a regimen. And as Brett mentions in this episode, sometimes you got to shake things up. Sometimes you're in a rut because we get stuck doing the same things over and over again. So be willing to shake it up. Get on a train to nowhere. Airlines are literally offering flights to nowhere. You get on a plane, you fly around for a few hours, and then you land right back to where you were. Cruise ships have been doing this forever. The little 2-3 day cruise ships, you go out to sea and then you come right back to where you started from and you don't even dock anywhere. And now airplanes are getting in on that cruise ship game. So you're going to find a lot of value from this. I'm excited. If you have not watched the documentary, The Weight of Gold on HBO, it's on there now. Like I said, Michael Phelps is narrating it. It's amazing. And you can always go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly, because it's hard to cope by yourself. If I was going through this quarantine by myself without my girl, I'd be going bananas. I would be unmanned. I would not be well, and not having a therapist to talk to, or at least my journal. My God, if I didn't have my journal with me, if I couldn't write or go for a walk, I couldn't imagine living somewhere where, especially like the winter, like winter is coming, and it's hard to, when the snow hits and it's like a 20 below, you just can't go anywhere. Oh, I can't even imagine. So, shore up your allies. As my sister said, build up a war chest. You have to go to war with your mental health, right? And so you have to build up a war chest, whether it's having the right foods in the fridge so that you're healthy and you don't get COVID or even the flu, or even you don't even want a cold right now, because the cold can become the flu, it becomes pneumonia, and then becomes cold. It's a domino effect. So build up your war chest of friends, build up your war chest of nutrition, your war chest of hobbies, of things to do, of meaning. Have things that anchor you and it'll keep you here, and have people that you're reaching out to. Remember, nothing happens overnight. It takes years to build up relationships. Don't think that everything has to be this immediate connection that we always see in TV and movies. Relationships take time to build. Give it time. Let it breathe like wine. All right, I've said enough. Go to thrivewithleo.com to work with yours truly one on one. And with that said, let's jump into the episode. Brett, I'm excited to have you on. I just watched The Weight of Gold and I loved every minute of it. Only sad part was I was like, why is this not longer? How is it not 90 minutes? Did you want a longer documentary, or did you want it at 60?
At one point it was 83 minutes, and then when we started working with HBO, everybody decided to take it down to 60 and kind of really just get it to be athletes only, because an earlier version had a bunch of different mental health experts and stuff like that. So yeah, we just decided to get it down to 60, but you're definitely right. There's a lot more story to be told, not just in the Olympic space, but in other sports, which is what we're focused on doing now.
All right, so I'm gonna jump around a lot here because there's so much I want to unpack with this, and I'm so grateful for you for telling this story. Because for the listeners out there, off the bat, I want you to understand and tell me if I'm interpreting this correctly. That The Weight of Gold, even though on the surface it's about athletes, how they're dealing with their mental health post career, especially it's included in the backdrop of 2020 Tokyo Olympics being canceled due to COVID, and now what do they do? But the overarching is what do Olympic athletes do once they're no longer Olympic athletes, and how do they cope mentally? And the bigger picture, though, that I want the listeners to take away is that how do we cope when we have hitched our identity to a certain career, job, focus, and then that's been taken away from us? How do we transition? Whether we're talking about, retiring from a 50-year career, 40-year career as a police officer, or for other athletes out there who are listening in, or even a teacher who retires, how do we deal with the transition from one thing to the next? So that's how I want you to process this episode, and thinking about how hard it is for everybody and anybody to go from, whether you've gone from being a parent, maybe you've lost a child and now you have to figure out what your identity is now that you are without child, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a story of transitions, and how do we transition? Is that a part of how you thought about this, Brett?
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of it. Definitely the transition and the identity piece of it. And, we live in a culture that's very achievement oriented, and we're celebrated for our achievements, whether that means you're an Olympic gold medalist or, working for a company and meeting your sales goals for that month. But Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, even before COVID, are going through a lot of different career transitions. We're not like our parents and certainly our grandparents' generation, where we're working for the same company for 30 years and getting the gold watch. Um, so it's, how do we navigate these changes through our lives and changes in identity, and do it in a healthy way?
What made you want to tell this story? I know you have a background in sports. Can you talk to us a little bit about why this story it was so powerful to you?
Yeah, well, I've been producing and directing sports films for close to 20 years now. I'm only not even 42, but got started pretty much right away after graduating the University of Arizona in Tucson. And, worked with a lot of different athletes, worked at the NFL, worked for, ESPN, Fox Sports, pretty much you name it. But this project really just started off as intending to do a short film about Stephen Holcomb, who was the current captain of the U.S. Olympic bobsled team. We shared a mutual eye doctor here in Los Angeles, and did a couple shoots with Stephen, including a long, emotional 3-hour interview here in LA when he was getting ready for the 2018 Winter Olympics. He had survived a suicide attempt, and somewhat miraculously, given what he ingested, and then won a gold medal at the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, which was the first in decades for U.S. bobsled. So that's really the only story I was planning to tell. But 12 days after that interview with him here in LA, I got a call from his agent that he was dead. He died in his bed at the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, New York, and that opened up the film to becoming something much different.
Did you have any hint that he was still struggling? I mean, it seemed like a guy who, had an issue with his eyes and then had it seemingly resolved, and then was able to still win medals. Was headed in the right direction, was on an upward trajectory. Did you have a hint that there was still something that was in the background bothering him?
Maybe, I think depression's a funny thing. I mean, recently someone said to me, you seem depressed. And I'm like, hey, look, with everything going on right now with the pandemic and Trump and the racial issues going on and wildfires in LA, it's like, how am I supposed to be acting? Am I supposed to be dancing on the ceiling? So I've just been trying to maintain kind of an even keel and kind of lay low and take care of my family and my business and my health. Um, so I think, a question for you, I'd be curious, like, what do you think depression looks like? And, um, how do you think people are supposed to be acting when things are challenging?
That's a great question. And I feel like depression is one of those things that has many faces because it can show up as, it's easy to recognize someone laying around all day, unkempt, not showering. Um, but really, depression is a change, it's the change in the behavior. It's not someone, laying on a couch all day. It's someone who was typically active, and then you see them laying on a couch. But because you could have somebody who lays on a couch all day and then all of a sudden has a bunch of energy, that could also be a sign of depression. It's a marked change in behavior, and I think that's why it catches so many people off guard. In that it has so many faces, and I know for me that sometimes like I get a bit more I feel a bit more frustrated, more irritable, and I don't want to sleep at night. I crave more sugars. I want to detach a bit more. My thoughts are a little different. And it is also like a physical aspect of like it's just hard to do the day-to-day things. It's like taking a shower sounds like, oh my God, it sounds so overwhelming. And it's something that I heard somebody describe it as like a sunburn, right? Where it doesn't really look that bad, but it just every movement can be painful. And but it's like I said, it's not like that for everyone at all phases. It depends on where you're at on the depression spectrum. So if someone, a part of depression is a feeling of hopelessness. So someone who is feeling completely hopeless, like nothing will ever get better, you might actually see a marked in quote unquote improvement in their affect. Like we're like, wow, they're smiling, they're having a good time, they're joking around, they seem to be eating, and it could be a sign of depression in that they feel like everything's hopeless. So, I got nothing to lose. And then you almost see that's when you start to see the riskier behaviors. They seem like they're outgoing and they're having fun, but what you really don't notice is that they're drinking more than usual, they're partying more than usual, they're up later than usual, and sometimes it could be hiking. We love exercise, and we always encourage people to get outdoors, get vitamin D, because that can help with endorphins and serotonin release and trigger melatonin so that you can sleep at night. However, if someone is working out for hours, that could be a sign of depression. They're just in the gym all day. So people can numb in so many ways that it really, when you start to see a marked change in behavior, that's when you want to start asking questions. But like I said, it's a hard thing to detect, which is why it's so important to talk to a mental health therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've been talking a lot here at Podium, which is our studio, about we certainly have a desire to do a lot more work in this world, just given the experience we had and the people we met, the reaction we got during the process of filming, where I do these different interviews with athletes and the camera crew. Those guys are kind of vigilantes. They're on a plane every day, at least pre-COVID, just doing different shoots and, thanking us for doing that interview. And then of course, having the opportunity to get a film on HBO, which is not easy to do. The reaction in the media with Michael Phelps and the other athletes going on everything from the Today Show to Anderson Cooper. So we want to do more of this. And we think, this project was certainly started pre-COVID. It was finished during COVID. I was in New York in March, planning to finish it at HBO, and had to come home pretty suddenly on March 11th and finish it, remotely. But as we look at, what impact can we make in this world, I don't think that we're going to single-handedly solve depression or any, but I think the thing that we can do, and I think the opportunity that we see, is to chip away at that stigma that you were just talking about, because so many people either don't want to get help, they're afraid to get help, they don't know how to get help, and that's avoidable. Because getting help is, reaching out to somebody, whether it's talking to a friend or a minister or a rabbi or a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a parent, and just talking about this stuff, and then maybe getting professional help and maybe trying medication, which works for some people, a lot of people. It all starts with just opening up. So anything we can do to try to eliminate that barrier is what we're trying to do with our work.
Well, I played high school, college football, and you playing sports also. We know that there's a mindset of just suck it up, and nobody wants to hear you complain, right? It's like if you're, I remember, playing games where, so every now and again I might get hit too hard, and I'm laying on the field, and the coach would come over and be like, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" And you knew that if you said you were hurt, it just means you needed to play off. If you were injured, you were out the game, And so no matter what your status really was, you said you were hurt. Your leg could be falling off, but I'm hurt, coach. And all right, so take a play off and then you come back in. And so that kind of mindset has always stuck with me, when when I'm not feeling at full capacity. I'm like, am I hurt or am I injured? And that kind of stuck with me of like, fight through it. Don't take me out the game. I'll do whatever I have to do to stay in the game. And part of that is not showing any weakness, right? You kind of grimace, you go off to the corner, you keep your helmet on, and you try to shake it off. And at some point that runs out, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that everybody's, I guess, got a different threshold for physical pain and psychological pain, and our culture definitely encourages us to play through pain. For me, I was having a lot of issues with anxiety, and I was afraid to fly. I was afraid to go to meetings on high floors of buildings because I was afraid of having panic attacks. And I would fight through it. I still did all that stuff, but it was really uncomfortable. The fear of, for people that have had panic attacks, the fear of it happening can almost be worse than actually experiencing it. And your brain just starts swirling. It's like, oh God, is it going to happen now? It's a horrible feeling. And at some point, a psychiatrist said to me, like, why don't you try medication? Like you're suffering here and you don't need to. And I was hesitant to do it. I wanted to figure it out on my own. I was trying meditation. I was trying yoga. Exercise. I exercise every day, and it, changes my whole body chemistry. Thank God for my Peloton bike in my garage I have right now, because it's been a lifesaver. Before I was able to get that, I was like doing jumping jacks in my garage. But it helped, it helped. I think there was like some kind of chemical imbalance, that was, I was able to correct, and it made my life a lot more enjoyable.
Man, people love their Peloton, and 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 so one of the takeaways I want from that part of the conversation, or this part of the conversation, is that you explored different movement modalities. I think a lot of people who aren't athletes and who aren't used to being physical, they take a class, or they try some workout, they hate it, and then they never try anything else. And I love that you expressed that you were doing jumping jacks, but our knees can only take so many of those. Um, but then you found Peloton and you fell in love with that. My sister right now is taking dance classes, and she loves it. Like, you can't get my sister to lift weights at all, but a dance class, she could do 90 minutes of that, no problem, and is excited. So I want to encourage the listeners out there. It's all about finding a movement modality that works for you, whether it's walking, hiking, dancing, Peloton, swimming, whatever it is. There is some dance, there's some type of movement modality that resonates with your body and your DNA, and that you will absolutely fall in love with.
That's for sure. Doing something physical just completely changes the way I feel. Even just going for a walk, I think that we're meant to move around. We're meant to get exercise, and both my wife and I, we're just different people after we work out, and luckily we're healthy enough and able to work that into our daily routine. But I'm like one person, like before my coffee and workout, and then another person after. So it's like the Hulk.
Oh, I'm the same way. My girl knows. Like, listen, don't talk to me before 10 a.m. I got like
Mm-hmm.
I got some self care to do before I could even look you in the eye.
That's it. That self-care is everything.
It's everything. And I going back to the documentary and these Olympians, part of the double-edged sword is that in order to do something great, you have to do what other people won't do. And when I listened back to the documentary, or watched it again, Sasha talked about how it's compulsive, the working out, and and then you had Katie call it addictive, and I forget the guy's name who was the went side to side. I forget what you call those guys. The not the
Apollo Ono.
Yeah, Apollo Ono. and he talked about how he was driven by fear and inadequacy. And when you have these underlying factors of addiction and feelings of inadequacy, compulsion, like those are in some ways great, obviously, for the sport of for training to be an Olympic, because you kind of need this hyper focus. You need to be compulsive about it, and it needs to be addictive so that you keep coming back and wanting to practice and study the game films and et cetera, et cetera. And then once that is all taken away from you and you have nowhere to for your compulsion to go and that addiction to go, and then you're just left with the fear and inadequacy, that can be a dangerous concoction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for athletes in particular, whether they're Olympians or NFL players or NBA players, they have such a sense of identity. I mean, look at I don't know if LeBron's a good example because he's got a lot of other business endeavors, and I think once he transitions out of playing in the NBA, he's going to have plenty to do. But from the time he was 10, first of all, he had all this attention on him because of his basketball ability, people wanting to help him with things and provide things to him. But on top of that, just the routine. I mean, they talk about, and I'm sure in the bubble it's really different, but these guys are told when to be in the lobby, when to get on the bus. They have a game, there's a clock, back on the bus, back in the hotel. Everything's regimented for them. And then all of a sudden that goes away. The identity of being in the spotlight goes away. Oh, and by the way, their salary goes from making millions of dollars to zero a lot of times. It's just a really unique and tough transition.
Yeah, because most of them weren't even in the $1 million category, right? Like these guys are getting. I think Phelps talked about you get 1,600 a month if you're not a face, if you're not a name, if you're not popular.
Yeah, we could have done a whole another project, and maybe at some point we will, just about the finances of being an American Olympian. But that was really surprising to me, and I think to a lot of people that have seen the film, because we do have a little section about that. The Olympic athletes are definitely not compensated in the way that most people would assume.
I got two questions. I want to go back a little bit to you personally, because you talked about panic attacks and taking meds, and riding the Peloton. Are you doing other things that are part of your self-care routine to help you manage the panic attacks?
Drinking bourbon, no. The medication's been really helpful. I think that there was like a cycle that was going on, like I was talking about before with, once you have a panic attack, you start having the fear of it. It becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The things that work for me are the exercise. I still try to meditate whenever I can. Ideally I try to do 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. I find it really powerful. I find that ideas come up that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I feel more peaceful, but it takes discipline. It's easy just to get up and jump into my day and start sending and responding emails and texts and all that, like we all do. I know that sleeping with my phone or my iPad next to the bed is not what's best for me, but I still do it. There's a lot of temptations. I think technology is something that we're all coming to terms with. There's a lot of great things about it, but I think it creates a lot of anxiety. I mean, the fact that anybody can text or call or email you at their convenience about whatever they want. I mean, I've certainly had beautiful evenings out. My birthday last year, I was out for dinner at a beautiful place with my family, and I checked my email, got something that I wasn't happy to get, and it kind of ruined my night, and then I was pissed at myself for allowing that to happen. Having said that, have I gotten rid of email on my phone? No, because I still have that curiosity and that wanting to know what's going on and stay informed. So I think to answer your question, technology is these phones I think are a big opportunity for us to um, practice some more self-care. And I think over the coming years, we're going to learn more and more about how damaging the devices, are for our peace of mind.
Yeah, Steve Jobs was notorious for not walking around with any devices. He walked the streets barefoot and was always seen deviceless and said he would never let his kids have any of the devices that he's created, which is so funny to me.
And super tricky. I mean, these devices have so much value. I mean, I on my phone, I'm doing everything between, checking the weather, checking the air quality because we had bad air quality in LA a couple of weeks ago. So now, I had to get that app, and then, I mean, text. I want to make sure my family's doing all right. Email, I'm like expecting, people to respond about certain business stuff. It's once you've gotten used to being connected that much, it's hard to disconnect. I mean, I'm crazy with this stuff. I'll turn my phone off and be like, all right, I'm not gonna be on my phone for the rest of the night. And then like 10 minutes later, I'll turn it back on. Like it's embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, to be even clear, I had downloaded an app on my phone called Hour Packed, and it will block out all the apps on your phone for a designated amount of time. But I also didn't realize it also blocked out FaceTime, so that wasn't any good. I've downloaded that app and a million times and taken it off just because I am just addicted to my phone. But I have gotten into the habit of leaving my phone in the car when I go out to dinner with friends now, because as painful as it is to be so present, I recognize the value in, you know, not being distracted and really having to listen into the discussion at the table and engage versus let me just check the scores real quick, or because sometimes you just do it, you don't even realize you have it in your hand and that you've been scrolling. And so I try to leave it in the car during dinner. That's the most I can be away from the phone right now.
No, it's totally addicting, and I'll even leave my phone at home sometimes because as long as my wife has her phone, we know that if there is an emergency, people will be able to reach us. We got the Waze on there, so we have the GPS, and that's all we really need is just to be reachable, especially with a kid. But yeah, I mean, I leave my phone at home, and there's that little kind of like twitch you get, like, where's my phone, and that curiosity. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that I think it's incredibly hard to be present when you've got that thing in your pocket or especially in your hand.
You talked about the fact that there were psychologists and psychologists and possibly psychiatrists, but mental health experts who were talking about what the Olympic athletes were going through. Were there any nuggets that stuck with you, that resonated with you, that you really wish you could have kept in, or any conversations that you had off camera that you thought would have been of great value to people watching it and people struggling with mental health?
I think that ultimately we were able to express everything, both story wise and messaging wise, that we needed and wanted to through the voice of the athletes. I mean, thanks largely to the athletes and just their vulnerability. The way the project evolved was it started with just being about Holcomb. It was going to be, a happy ending with him going to the 2018 Olympics and hopefully winning another gold medal, kind of the road to the Olympics sort of thing. And then when he passed away, I learned about this post-Olympic depression phenomenon issue. And so then I was just going to kind of track the roller coaster of emotions that they go on, every 4 years, and which is just a really unique cycle, right? So using LeBron again as an example, like he's going to go out over the next couple of weeks, and either he's going to win a ring, or he's going to not win a ring, and he might take a little time off, go to Cabo, whatever, and chill for a week, but he's going to get right back at it. And this year's actually a bad example because they don't know when the NBA season is going to start again because of COVID. But in a normal year, he'd be back out there competing in a couple months. If you're an Olympian, you go to the Olympics, and win or lose, you have to wait 4 years to do it again. And most of them only do one. So, the sort of plan A was Holcomb. Plan B was following the emotional journey. But what I learned in talking to the athletes, especially with the first interview I did with Michael Phelps, which was in January of 2018, at the end of the interview, I was like, is there anything else you want to add? And he said, yeah, as I think back, I don't think anybody even really, cared about our mental health as long as we were performing. And that was a huge revelation because I was of the, impression that the Olympic teams had all these incredible resources in place for mental health, the same as they do for physical health. But that turned out not to be the case. And so we started getting more into that.
And why is that? I mean, I would think also because I'm listening to Tiger Woods' book right now, and he had a sports psychologist from a very early age, and I would think that through all the work that athletes have done beforehand and what their process has been, and knowing that psychology has always been a part of the game, I would think that for sure if we're representing America, the United States, we would have that in place. Why was that piece missing or lacking, I should say?
Well, they do have the sports performance piece of it, right? So if you're looking to work on how to visualize and hit the fastball in the bottom of the ninth, they've got that. But at the other end of the spectrum, as it relates to psychology, it's not striking out, it's wanting to kill yourself. So, I think that first of all, there's the stigma. Okay. So we can't forget about that. If you're, most people who are, let's just stay on the Olympic tip, unless, for every Michael Phelps, there's 1,000 swimmers that are on the bubble of whether they're going to make the Olympics or not. Right. And in a lot of these sports, the coaches do have some discretion over who makes a team and who doesn't. So there's a hesitation to go to the coach or somebody who's in touch with the coach and be like, hey, I'm struggling with depression, because they see it as, a knock on them, as a negative. So it starts with the athletes have to be comfortable going to somebody and knowing that it's not going to hurt their standing to talk about, these issues of depression or anxiety, et cetera. But the people that work for these different, because each sport has their own NGB, national governing body, that are under the umbrella of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, which is under the umbrella of the IOC, the International Olympic Commission. They just need to broaden the services they offer to beyond just being from sports performance to being about, the full spectrum of mental health. And I'd be curious with Tiger Woods whether the people he worked with on his sports performance were able to also work with him when he was dealing with, anxiety and depression and some of these other issues.
That's a great question. I have not finished the book, but and I have a feeling they probably won't even go into that. But that is a great question. And you're right. There's a component. I was actually contacted by a NBA team to work with some athletes with transitioning post, because even for myself, transitioning from college football, I was injured after my fourth year. I had one more year to go, and I woke up with a paralyzed from a game, and so my career was over then. And I remember going to the doctor, and getting the results back from him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you have bulging disc in your neck. You won't be able to play anymore." And then he just like walked out the room. And I was in the room with my girlfriend, and I remember just feeling like my world, my life was over. Felt crushed, devastated, but feeling like I couldn't cry or show emotion because, first, I'm a guy, and then two, my girl is right there. And it took me a long time to realize how much I was struggling when I look back on some of my behaviors after that, to realize I was struggling with depression. I was eating more. I was sleeping so much. My grades kind of took a nosedive. And you talked earlier about routine and regimen. Literally, if you look at my transcripts from college, I was a I was a dean's list student during the season, and then I was like a D and F student during the off season. Like some people, some of us we require that daily routine, and when that's taken away from us, we become completely unhinged.
Yeah, well, for you, because another world we're looking at, and we've actually done some filming, is around the NCAA and especially college football and mental health. Did you feel like, especially once you had that injury, that there was someone you could talk to on campus about the way you were feeling?
Well, that's a great question because here's a double-edged sword. When you are, I think I was 20 at the time, 2021. When you're used to performing at a certain level and kind of demanding out of your body what you want, and growing up in a household where you didn't talk about emotions, I didn't have an emotional vocabulary. I just knew I wanted to cry and that I couldn't cry, and we did have a sports psychologist on the team, but not feeling like they were really accessible. Like it was almost painted in like you don't see the sports psychologist unless you really need to see the sports psychologist, and you don't really need to see the sports psychologist. Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah.
and so I was also aware that we had resources on campus of therapists to go talk to, and even though I went to go talk to a few therapists, I was just completely shut down. I would go in there and I would say maybe one or two words and just kind of lay there and blah 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 and then leave. I mean, it would have taken like a Goodwill Hunting therapist, Robin Williams, to really connect with me at that time. So I think the services were there, but being able to connect with the right person to help me through what I was going through, that was a challenging part. If that make yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure. I mean, we have to make those people, those resources more accessible. Less stigma, um, less interference. I mean, I envision a world where we just talk to a mental health professional on a weekly basis or a biweekly basis, the same way we would talk to, anybody. It just, the evidence is in and it benefits people. So it's important.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the marketing of it too. Of like, I don't need a psychologist. Like you think of somebody that you're just going to and talking to your feelings about, but you don't realize that even in post athletic career, the idea of visualizing your next steps and visualizing your day and affirmations and all that, like all that is transferable into your next career, your next life, the next steps that you want to take. But way I was brought up, like that was only for sports. You didn't visualize your day on a job or visualize yourself taking a test. You visualize playing the game, and that's all visualization was for. So I think there's also um, uh, we have to somehow do a better job of marketing exactly what therapy is and what therapists can do, and the different types of therapy, so that people aren't afraid to go in and talk. But yeah, at 21, you just feel like you know it all, and you're like, I got this. I'll figure it out. I'm good. Like that. That's your emotional vocabulary. I'm good. You know.
Hmm.
And so there's that challenge too of especially for guys of overcoming um, that ego and that like I'll handle it, I'll figure it out, through food or women or drugs, or I'll just I think I was working out like 3 hours a day, looking back, I was clearly trying to handle my emotions in what I thought was a healthy way, but never really got to the root of it.
Yeah, let me ask you this: do you feel like I've read that there's an additional layer of stigma in the African American community? Is that something that you think is true or that you've experienced about getting therapy?
Yeah, because there was zero mental health talk. Like you were either good or pissed. That was the emotional vocabulary, or you were crazy. That was it. You were crazy, good, or pissed. And so anything outside of that wasn't a discussion. And it was, don't be moping around here all day. Don't be laying, like that's the big stigma of like, don't be moping around. Don't be laying around here all day. You going to work or you going to school. You got to be doing something. You got to, and nobody really asked how you were, how you felt, everything. But, as a society, that's when we address each other, it's always with so what are you doing or how are you doing? Everything's about do, and we never ask like how are you feeling? What are you feeling? We never get to the feel. We always want to know what you're doing. So as we're kind of creating this perpetual angst of being on a treadmill. But yeah, definitely in a black community there's not that, because there's not time. There's not time in a black community to deal with emotions because you're working two jobs. You got to catch the bus, then you got to catch the train, and then you got to go pick up the kids. And it's like there's too much to do when you are hustling, when you're trying to keep the food on the table and the lights on and a roof above your head. There's too much to do to be stopping and feeling.
I hear you. Well, I think that's an opportunity for our generation is to really move the ball forward in this area. We're very focused on doing as much of this kind of work as possible, and appreciate what you're doing as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. Is there anything from the that you wanted to include that you didn't get a chance to, or you want to expound on? I know you're talking about more work. What's the next step for this conversation for you?
Yeah, we're just really focused on doing as many projects as we can that focus on, social issues, with mental health being at the forefront right now, through the lens of sports. We really think that athletes talking about these issues because of the standing that they hold in our culture has the chance to really, really move the needle in a way that few things don't. So the more we can, plug different athletes like a Michael Phelps or a Kevin Love, or DeMar DeRozan, or Dak Prescott recently, into content that we can get out there with some conversation around it, that feels like a real calling. And we're looking for people that want to support that as well, so that it's not necessarily something that we need a broadcaster to necessarily wave their magic wand to do. There's a lot of ways to make content now and get it out there with digital technology and streaming. So, we're excited to really build something sustainable that can, be the industry leader in that area.
I love that. And one of the major takeaways for me from the documentary Weight of Gold is the importance of having a family or a network or a team or a purpose outside of the sport. A lot of the athletes, the Olympic athletes on the documentary talked about, being hyper focused and also to the brink of like pushing people away or anything away that had nothing to do with the sport. They're in constant fight or flight mode. And when you're pushing people away and then your sport is gone, there's nobody around. There's Lolo Jones talked about the loneliness that accompanied her after missing that hurdle, and I would imagine there's nobody there because we also aren't there for anybody. I think about when I played sports, I wasn't, I was an athlete. That's all I was, and I don't have time for anything else. that's outside of that. And then as you get humbled a little bit, you realize the importance of connecting with people and showing up for others because you need that, and that's the thing that can continue to feed you. An example is there was a guy who played for Ball State, wide receiver, and he was going pro, and this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and maybe 10 years ago actually. He was going pro, and in one of the last games of the season, went up for a touchdown catch and landed on his neck, breaking his neck. He lived, and for NFL career out the window. And I ran into him years later, and I asked him how he coped with it mentally and emotionally to have his career ripped away from him. And he said, God and family. And the guy was still working out, and he said it without any hesitation, without flinching. Almost said it with pride. He was like, God and family, like what else could there be? And I just want to say that for the listeners out there. I'm not saying find God, and I'm saying find family, but the point is that we have to have anchors in our life that keep us here. We have to have a purpose outside of the career and the job that can't be everything.
Well said. Well said, Leo Flowers.
Brett, is there anything else you want to share with us that we haven't talked about from the documentary Weight of Gold, or anything that you learned that you want to share?
I'm good, but let's continue the conversation and do it again soon. What do you think?
I love it, brother. And then last question, I ask this of all my guests, is always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of ending their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Brett?
It's okay not to be okay, and it gets better. Get out there, talk to somebody, go move your body, change. I mean, I remember I had a point where I had moved to New York for a short time. It was the middle of winter. I was lonely. I was getting over a breakup, and I was depressed. And I worked with a therapist, and she encouraged me just to change things up. And I started going up to Montreal. I had some friends there, and I would just get on the train from Penn Station, 12 hours. And I started spending time in Montreal, and it was new and it was fresh, and it got me out of my rut. I was in a rut, and that was a game changer for me. And I'll always carry that with me. Sometimes it makes me impulsive now if I'm feeling down, or I'm like, let's move. And my wife doesn't love that, but I encourage people to, besides certainly getting help, talking to people, being open to medication if that's something that might help them. Change your scenery, take a road trip, try living somewhere else, change things up. I think that can be really helpful too.
Brett Rapkin, thank you so much for taking this time out. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for going to get help, for calling the 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK. You can always go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thanks so much, Brett.
Thank you, Leo. Be well.